Session 97 of the Law of One. This is the first part of the session, and we're going to talk here about the meaning of synchronicity. Let's begin. Actually, the title of this video was a little bit of a struggle for me because there are a couple of things that are said here that I think are really interesting, and to let the cat out of the bag a little bit, we're going to cover mostly questions from book 5, so personal material, and there are some interesting questions there, but the really juicy one is at the end of this first part, because there is a message that is so needed right now, and I hope that I can convey it to you who are interested in this complexity of model of reality and all this spiritual seeking. So I hope if you can get this message, it'll alleviate a lot of what you believe, it's necessary, and all the different hurdles that we put in our way in the path. So stay, of course, tuned for the last question. Or if you're on a rush, of course, and you don't care about the personal material, you can just move to the timestamp here on YouTube. If you're on Spotify, iTunes, or anywhere else, then you're going to have to find question 9 of session 97 at some point. But just stay and listen. It's going to be a good ride, so I promise you. Let's begin with the first question that starts off this session like anybody or any other else. And it's question 1, where Don says, "Could you first please give me the condition of the instrument?" And Ra says, "It is as previously stated, so nothing has changed." Don says in question 2, "What's the situation with our 5th density negative friend?" Ra repeats, "It is as previously stated, so everything is just as before." Then question 3 is where we get into the personal material and the reason why I titled this video this way. Don says, "I have been doing some consideration of the appearance of the hawk and have made this analysis of the bird in card 3. The bird is a message from the higher self, and the position of the wings in card 3, one wing pointing toward the female, indicates that it is a message to the female acting as catalyst for the mind. The position of the downward wing indicates that the message is of a negative or of a nature indicating the inappropriateness of certain mental activity or plan. Would Ra comment on that?" What kind of answer do you think Ra's going to give? They say a plain no. We cannot comment on this. Now, several things I can say here in regards to the raw material, the law of one, synchronicities, and everything else. In terms of the raw material, we're talking about the history of LNL research through the sessions. We know we're approaching the end of this contact, and we know that this ended with Don committing suicide at some point in 1984. So it's a whole long discussion that it doesn't pertain to this particular topic, but we know that part of that was his mental deterioration, something that Carla and Jim talk about in book 5 in the commentary, which I never read. It's really interesting. I probably should, but I don't want to make this as longer than it is already. But I would recommend anybody. I mean, it's an easy read. I don't need to read that and interpret it for you. So you can just go and read it and find more information. It's very complimentary to every session that they had personal material excluded from the original books. So Don's mental health was declining, and I think we can see a little bit of a window here into Don's mind when he is insisting, on the interpretation of this hawk. Again, it's not my place to say what I'm going to say, but I want to share it anyway. I personally have never experienced a negative synchronicity, or a synchronicity that tells me, you know, act out of fear. In fact, every time you act out of fear, you build a road of lies, of falsehood, and you're constructing a path of deception, of untruth. So again, every time you make a decision based on fear, you're constructing that road and you're living on that road. So I personally don't believe that there are negative synchronicities, or synchronicities from negative entities, or just simply synchronicities are not negative. They could possibly, you know, very obviously warn about something, and even the warning, I've never experienced such a warning. If anything, it's just an inspiration towards a better path, not something negative. Why am I saying all of this? Because this is what Don was suggesting, and you will see it again in the next questions. So he is using the tarot, card number 3, to try to interpret this synchronicity. There are so many things that are off here that I won't even go into the details because they're not necessary, but just Don's attempt to try to interpret this synchronicity. And again, they don't even say synchronicity, but to me it is. I mean, a hawk landing on, you know, the window of the kitchen in the house that you're going to move. I don't know about you, but I would interpret this as, hell yeah, let's do it. You know, like this is great. That's an inspiration to me. It would never occur to me, and I can't think of anybody who could possibly interpret that sign as being negative, of not wanting to move. And I think in the commentary here, Jim said that they didn't move into the house because Don was the boss. Don was the one that made the decisions, and you know, it just didn't happen. So yeah, it's just to me, it's a wrong way to interpret messages and synchronicities. I don't believe there are. You see, there's such a key distinction between synchronicities and messages of inspiration, and manipulation and fear thoughts. Like, that's just so obvious. So you can have a message, and if you're interpreting it with fear and negativity, then it's not part of the message. It's part of your mind, and your mind is being influenced by something that it's not true. That's how you deconstruct your interpretation of anything. It could be anything. It could be, you know, chewed gum on the floor and you step on it, you know, and depending on how your mind reacts, you can say, oh, this is a sign of the universe, of this and that. Depending on your reaction, that's what you need to analyze. That's when you need to sit down and say, why did I have that reaction? You know, everything is a synchronicity. Everything is pushing you towards building a path of light, let's say, of truth, of wholeness, real path. You see? So, to me, this whole interpretation of the position of the downward wing indicates that the messages is of the negative nature, in indicating the inappropriateness of certain mental activity or plan. I mean, even maybe his interpretation on the tarot could be appropriate. I don't know, but it just doesn't ring true to me. That, you know, all of this is why Ra didn't even say, you know, well, let's untangle this, and they just said no. Don's question was, would Ra comment on that? And they just simply said no. You see? So much to see here, and it has to do with how we interpret reality. What is it that is in our minds that is interpreting life in general? What is it that we're seeing? That says a lot about ourselves, not about the message or reality in general. It doesn't. But okay, he's gonna follow up. Question 4, he says, is the reason for this lack of comment the first distortion? Ra says, this is correct. And once again, I'll just emphasize that the raw material, or actually Ra in general, they were very adamant in not infringing upon free will. And this is, a great example of that, because Don needs to find out for himself any interpretation that he has a preconceived idea of what this is. You see, and so he's trying to validate it. And anything that you say towards that, it's going to move in that direction. So you are infringing on free will for people to make a decision, for people to think for themselves. And this is something that, as a teacher, you learn. You understand that there are things that you cannot learn for the other person. So, for example, the other day I had a student ask me on a specific issue because of the interaction, right, with his patients, and he asked me about what do I do, when the person is acting with their ego, and I recognize that is their ego talking, and what's the appropriate reaction there. And I felt that anything that I could say there, in terms of his reaction, to promote his reaction, because he's doubtful. Should I react? Is it okay for me to react with my ego? Is it should I repress it and try to, that's your decision. And I cannot, as much as I can say, no, you should refrain from being a certain way because it can depolarize you. All of this is nonsense. Anything that I could say is nonsense. The only important thing is what the person is going through. And I have emphasized over and over again in so many ways that it's fine to react anyway. And I'm saying something that it's going to be scolded by some people, but it's fine to react physically and verbally aggressive. There's nothing wrong with that. You need to find what is wrong with that. You see, what I'm saying is that don't feel bad because you have been reacting physically and verbally in the past in a certain way. What does that mean? You are beyond redemption? That doesn't exist. So it's fine. It's fine that you're still reacting, and don't repress it. I mean, yes, general rule is if you can repress your physical aggressiveness and your verbal, fine. That's okay. But don't feel bad because you didn't. And you couldn't. It was automatic. It was an unconscious behavior. Actually, be glad that you can now analyze it and see, instead of just saying, that's just how I am, which is most people, they defend themselves and say, that's just how I am. No, just be mindful of everything. Be mindful of all your reactions to life, every single thought. And the pathway is this one. You have a physical reaction, which is, of course, preceded by a verbal reaction, which in turn is preceded by a thought reaction. You see? So it's thought, speech, and action. Reverse it, just go back. Wherever you are in that reaction, it could be thought, could be physical, could be verbal, just pay attention to that. And yes, certain things that you express out, which is verbal and action, those things can be harmful for other people. So as much as possible, be mindful not to do it. But if you're not mindful and it just happens, then it happens. So it's okay. So you see, I would never say to anybody, just don't do this or do this, but rather explain everything that is surrounding their particular situation and point out, those things. What is it that makes you react this way, or makes you even consider to react this way? All these things to me are important because they preserve the free will of the person to make the decision, as opposed to just validating that no, you should repress everything and try to be calm all the time. Try? No, you do, and you learn from doing. You see? And for doing, you have to be yourself. So there are so many things that could be expanded upon here, but that's Ra's intention always, and we can all learn from this preserving of free will, especially when we get into the spiritual path and then we want everybody to be on it, and we want to diagnose people and tell them, this is wrong with you, this is wrong, you need to fix this, you need to heal, you need to align, you need to balance. Precisely because we're trying to do it with ourselves, So we get into this frenzy, this spiritual frenzy of trying to fix the world. It's not going to happen. Stop trying. You can't fix the world. You can only fix yourself. And by fixing yourself, lo and behold, the world is fixed without me even trying, because everything comes from inside. But okay, let's move to the next question. Question 5, Don says, I have analyzed the hawk that I saw immediately after returning from the house in Atlanta as a message, most probably from my higher self, indicating that the plan of moving was not the best, was not too appropriate, since without the hawk, everything would have continued as planned with no added catalyst. This single catalyst of a remarkable nature then, logically from my point of view, could only mean that there was a message as to the inappropriateness of the plan for some reason yet to be discovered. Would Ra comment on that? Now, before I get into Ra's commentary, because they are going to say something here, let me just emphasize what happened to my camera. Did I just destroy it? I think I just did. There we go. I think that's better. Or that. Okay, we're back. So let me just comment that Don is in essence asking Ra for validation here, right? He's not saying validate me, but please comment on this. And he's set in his idea that the hawk meant that, but he wants it to be validated. Yes, he's very specific about what's happening. He says, I have analyzed the hawk, which is a message probably from my higher self, indicating that the plan to moving was not the best. And he thinks this because if it wasn't for the hawk, everything would have continued as planned with no added catalyst. So his plans were interfered by the hawk somehow, and we can simply see Don's reaction here as being too paranoid, I would say, which I don't blame him, and of course I'm not making any jest out of that, but just pointing it out. We can get into that. We all can get into that. We're all human. But I really want to emphasize it because we can, and if anything, there is a lesson here for us. And he realizes that this single catalyst of a remarkable nature can only logically be a message of the inappropriateness of the plant for some reason yet to be discovered. So he doesn't know, you see, but he's thinking maybe maybe even thinking this is the thing. I mean, we get too much in our heads. Ra had mentioned that the house needed some ritual cleansing, which they were supposed to do. I don't think they did, because they didn't move into the house, but they were going to. Maybe that got into Don's head and said, that's the reason why the hawk means, or says, please don't move into this house. This house is tainted. But I don't know about you, but the way I interpreted that necessity for cleansing the house is that it was a minor thing. Like every house obviously is going to have some energy that is not going to be compatible with you. So if you want to clean it, then clean it. It's just like when we move into the house, we tend to organize things the way we want. that's it. There's no hell in there. Sure, some houses may require a lot more cleaning and painting and who knows what else, reshaping, remodeling, whatever it is. We do that. It's fine. As long as we bring our harmony to it, that's it. That's all that matters. So, yeah, I don't think it was an important thing, but Don seemed to consider that, or think that way, at any rate. So he's saying all of this, and Ra's going to comment on it. They say, we tread as close as possible to the law of Confucian in suggesting that not all winged creatures have an archetypical meaning. We might suggest that the noticing of shared subjectively notable phenomena is common when, in another incarnational experience, work significant to the service of increased polarity has been shared. So, right from the get-go, they're saying, we're going to talk about this, but we're very close to suggesting something to you. You see, to infringing upon free will. That's the law of Confucian. Free will. The law of free will. And they're suggesting, that's where they're getting close by saying, not all winged creatures are of an archetypical meaning. So when you look at bird, then don't try to associate it with archetypal information or meaning. That seems logical to me. In fact, I consider everything in the tarot to be symbolic and not really representative of nature itself. I don't know, maybe have a big disconnect with all of this symbology, but that seems logical to me. And then they say, this is interesting, right? They say that share subjectively notable phenomena. My God, share subjectively notable phenomena. So they're talking about the hawk here, in this case, and the interpretation, subjective interpretation, is common when in another incarnation experience, so in another life, significant work for service has been shared. So I don't know if this is between the three of them, right? Because it says shared subjectively notable phenomena is common when in other lives then this service has been also shared. I think they're talking about Don, Carla, and Jim as a group, that, right? Because that's shared subjectively notable phenomena. That is common when in the past, in other incarnational lives, they have had significant service or significant work in service to others in this case, and has increased polarity. But that's not all. They finish saying, this subjectively interesting shared phenomena then act as a means of communication, the nature of which cannot be discussed by those outside of the shared incarnational experience without the interference with the free will of each entity involved in the complex of subjectively meaningful events. Okay, so yeah, the intricate way in which Ra is saying all of this is simply... I'm going to play with my video again. It just looks terrible. Is that better? Let's leave it at that. Yeah, so they're definitely talking about the appearance of the hawk, in essence, is something that they should discuss. You see? And not for Ra to discuss. They say, these subjectively interesting shared phenomena then act as a means of communication. Okay, so it's a way of informing all of them. The nature of which, that's what Don is saying, something yet to be revealed. Why? I can't move into that house. Well, the nature of that cannot be discussed by those outside of the shared incarnational experience without interference with the free will of each entity involved. So, in essence, they're saying those messages and those synchronicities, us, Ra, who are not sharing the incarnational experience with you, cannot discuss it without infringing on free will, on the free will of those involved, which is Don, Carla, and Jim. Yeah, if you reread this paragraph again, you'll find out that that's what they're saying. These synchronicities cannot be interpreted, or yes, interpreted by us who are not there. Only you can interpret it, and you should talk about it. It's a great suggestion, of course, for Don to bring this. And now that we know what Carla and Jim thought, in their commentary, they say that they thought it was a sign of, great, let's do it. They were positive about it. Whereas Don was influenced by a negative thought, thinking that it wasn't appropriate for them to move there. And how sad would it sound in the story of all of them if that was the house that they were supposed to continue the raw contact in, and they didn't. I remember Carla saying that they took from there on, at some point maybe after Don's death, the hawk as a sign for Ra. So every time they saw a hawk, they thought of Ra. And they actually had I forgot what's the name of a group of hawks, but they had hawks nesting in their house in Louisville, Kentucky, in the 90s, at least when they wrote the book 5. So again, Ra is refraining from making any commentary, and they're just suggesting in a very subtle way that they discuss it. They're not saying you should discuss it, but they're saying that these are things that happen to people who have had incarnational experiences in the past with service. This is something that Ra also mentioned when they talk about them being wanderers, and I think 2 were from 6th density, 1 from 5th density. So they had a relationship already, previous lives together. And so, this is what happens when you are together with people who have shared your experience in the past, especially in the service. So much that we can go into, but let's move to the next question. Don says, and this is again more of book 5 material, he says in question 6, can Ra please tell us the source of the unusual odor in this room this morning? Ra says there are 2 components to this odor. One is, as has been surmised, the decomposing physical vehicle of one of your 2nd density rodentia. The second is an elemental which is attempting to take up residence within the putrefying remains of this small creature. Ra says and finishes, the cleansing of the room and the burning of the incense has discouraged the elemental. The process of decomposition shall, in a short period of your space-time, remove the less than harmonious sensations provided for the nose. What a way to speak. I love it. So Don is interested now in a smell in the room, and nothing too esoteric about it. Dead rat or mouse, who knows? And it was rotting. It was just decomposing, so it would produce that smell. There are 2 components. So one is the decomposing body of the mouse, I would say, or rat, who knows? And the second was an elemental. So here's where it gets a little esoteric or metaphysical. What is this elemental? Well, let me give you my view, my interpretation of what this elemental is. Similar to the lower astral entities in the house that they were supposed to move in, and they had to do some cleansing. Nature in general has rules. It has specific patterns in which it needs to move. Okay, some are of a higher order, some are of a lower order. These are necessary because that's what creates the whole ecosystem. If everything were to grow and nothing to die, then we wouldn't have evolution. We would simply have permanence or an element of permanence that is it's not appropriate to this density, at least the way it is designed right now. I don't know if this was the case pre-Veil, who knows, but I feel that nature needs obviously these ups and downs. So I wouldn't consider these elementals to be negative, meaning negative in consciousness, but just like saying, mud is mud, and is just very, it's low density consciousness. It's also not very informative. It's mud, and yet it's needed in nature. So we're dealing with more like creating an environment that is conducive to growth and to harmony, as opposed to something that doesn't. So we're dealing, of course, with the cleanliness again of environment. That doesn't mean that if you have mud in your house somehow, you bring it in your shoes or something like that, then you're bringing hell with you. We tend to believe things this way sometimes, like, oh my god, I gotta be so clean. Yes, it's encouraged. I mean, don't leave things messy. Keep things organized. Even dust, just clean it. Keep things organized. If you don't need things, give them away or throw them out. This hoarding, if we see extremes of people who hoard stuff, and my mom was not a hoarder by any means, but she would collect so many things and keep them in the house, and it was just so much cluttered stuff that she never used because it's when my niece comes to visit, she'll have this and that. And I guess there's beauty there, of course. I'm not saying it's a terrible attitude, but I'm saying keep things to a minimum. You don't need that many things, and that really clutters your space. So what is the energy that you're going to read in a house that has so much stuff? Well, it's not pleasant. And so that's the sort of elementals that I see that are surrounding our environment, and it's just the order of things. This is why we have, again, so many traditions that design the house in a way that the windows are pointing somewhere and the beds and so on, because all of this is sort of like a mastery of keeping a house that it feels inviting, that it makes you feel well. But on the contrary, then there is the extreme of people who are so obsessed with cleaning and keeping everything organized that you ruin it. You ruin it for yourself and everybody else, because everything needs to be so polished and forget about putting things out of place. You put this person in a state of neurosis because that's not supposed to be there. So you gotta have some leeway for things to be messy and then clean them up. But again, some people may feel completely comfortable in a super hygiene environment and they are not upset by things getting messy sometimes. That's fine. You gotta find a balance, but it's all about extremes here and analyzing those things. It's fine. No, you shouldn't be obsessed is the thing, in any direction. So yeah, that's it. And just see, Ra says that just by burning incense and cleaning the room, that has discouraged the the elemental. I don't even know if the rat or mouse was still there. I think it is, because Ra was pointing it out, if they had cleaned it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the little animal or the corpse was still there. But let's say it was. Even if it was, then the burning of the incense and cleaning was enough, to discourage the elemental to get there. Okay, let's move to the next question. Don says, I find myself presently in a difficult position of decision, primarily because of the appearance of the aforementioned hawk after our return from Atlanta. The only objective of any value at all is the work that we are doing, which includes not only the contact but communication and dissemination of information to those who might request it. Since the move was connected with that, and since the hawk was, to me, obviously a function of that process, I am at present in a quandary with respect to the optimal situation, since I have not yet decided definitely on the significance of the hawk or the advantages of efficaciousness of the move, and do not want to create a process which is basically irreversible if it is going to result in a lack of our ability to be of service to those who would seek that which we are able to manifest through our efforts here. Would Ra comment on that situation? Again, I'm not going to go through everything that Don said here, but you can see that he's very, very disturbed by this, because he's not able to make a decision. So many elements here point out to Don being too nervous, too worried, fearful of what this means. Beyond what the hawk meant, I think it's always important to always ask, how do I feel about the situation? If I feel nervous, if I feel scared, if I feel angry or whatever other emotion, first deal with that. That's clouding your judgment completely. First, take care of that. Second, see how that inspires you to a better path, and how and where, without the fear. Fear is going to always hijack your decision. So he's in essence trying to ask Ra, please help me. I need to figure this out, and I can't. Help me. But Ra cannot help him. And he's putting, there's so many things here. Don is evoking the feeling of life only matters because we're doing this contact with you. That's another fallacy. Do not ever, and here I am giving advice and sounding like Don is wrong, which is not appropriate. But let me point out that when we become too obsessed with something, we get possibly what Ra was saying as a martyr. Like Don was being a martyr to a degree here, like sacrificing, putting everything in front. Putting this in front of everything else, this contact, right? That's the whole reason why we're doing this. That's why we had the hawk, and this is. We get a little blind when we start thinking this way. Like, this is the reason why I live right now. Take some time. Don't fall into that. Analyze things. Give time to just let it sit. Let it sit. So many things. But okay, what will Ra say here? Ra says, the questionnaire presumes much, and to comment is an infringement upon its free will. We may suggest the pondering of our previous comments regarding the winged creatures of which you speak. We repeat that any place of working properly prepared by this group is acceptable to Ra. The discrimination of choice is yours. And again, I'm going to go on a limb here and say that Ra, in essence, told him here, move to the house, it's fine. As long as, you properly prepare by yourself, that's fine. I mean, here is the hint. We repeat that any place of working properly prepared by this group is acceptable to Ra. It doesn't matter if it's, in one state or the other, one house, an apartment, whatever it is, as long as they prepare it and they feel fine, that's it. You only need to bring your peace of mind to the place. That's it. The discrimination of choice is yours. And of course, they won't comment anything. So, beyond historically what happened with Don and getting the lesson of us, let me give my example, my experience. I enjoy doing one thing, as you can see, which is the dissemination, to use Don's word, the dissemination of my interpretation of this material, because I love it so much. But exponentially more do I enjoy disseminating the experience of knowing yourself, of finding unity, of the end of the seeking, speaking about the spiritual path. That's what I'm really all about. But if I were to be completely obsessed by this or devoted to this, I would have to sacrifice things that, to me, are more important, actually, which is my family and my way of living. So I keep a balance in things. That's just what pushes me. That's what ignites me. And I do this. That's my service. As Don was saying, you can see that he wanted to have the perfect environment to continue this contact. He wasn't even worried about himself. He just was too obsessed with the contact, I think. And that made him create too much tension. So much tension that it started affecting the group, of course, as we know from Carla's account. Don was starting to feel like he was going to lose Carla, and he started to get paranoid, and his mental health declined. For whatever reasons, there's so much that we can possibly take out of this, but that's what happened. And so, yes, a balance in what you're doing, and not to be fine when your obsession is making you feel uncomfortable, and stop it there. In any case, let's move on, because we have 2 more questions and I want to really cover it with enough time. Question 9. Question 8, which is just a bypass here. Don says, are there any items in the first 4 cards not of Ra's intention that we could remove to present a less confusing card as we make our new drawings? Ra says, we find much material in this query which would constitute repetition. May we suggest rephrasing the query? And Don is going to ask the question again, but let me bring you to the gist of this discussion, which is Don, Carla, and Jim were redrawing the cards of the tarot based on what Ra was suggesting, saying this belongs, this doesn't belong, this means this. And so Don had the idea, which is a brilliant idea, of making a less distorted version of the tarot. And they started doing that, and that's beautiful. So Don's question is going in this direction. He's saying, what else can we remove that shouldn't be there in the tarot, right? But Ra says that the question was not properly phrased, basically, and there's so much that they would repeat. You can see that Ra already caught, from my point of view, Ra already caught what Don is asking. Right? Just let's keep refining these cards. And Ra's going to give an answer that to me is the most beautiful in this session. By far. I don't think it's going to be topped by anything in this session. So let's see what Don says in question 9. He says, possibly I didn't phrase that the way I meant to, which was, we already have determined the items that should be removed from the first 4 cards. The question was, Have I missed anything that should be removed which were not of Ra's original intention in the last few sessions of determining what should be removed? Again, the question is about, let's keep refining these cards so we have perfect cards. We already know that Ra said there's no way to have a pure description of the archetypes. That doesn't exist. There's going to be distortions. Don't worry. That's not the purpose. That's not the intention of the tarot. But Don keeps insisting, let's focus on purifying, refining even more these cards. So what do you think Ra is going to say? Ra says, we shall repeat our opinion that there are several concepts which in each image are astrologically based. However, these concepts are not without merit within the concept complex intended by Ra, given the perception by the student of these concepts in an appropriate manner. Now, they're starting the answer here by saying, let's discuss that there are astrologically influenced symbology here, as well as cultural. They didn't say cultural, but there is cultural, which, if there is a sort of clothing or the bird or anything that is specific to the culture, couldn't that be refined into a new version? Of course it could. But is it necessary? No, it isn't. To which point are we going to say, because then let's say we refine the bird to something that is local. I'm from the tropical area, from Venezuela, so we have a lot of birds, like the guacamaya, beautiful bird. It's like a parrot, but it's you can have different colors like red, blue, yellow, and so on. Beautiful. Am I going to use that? Yeah, of course I'm going to. But then, the Russians would say, we need to refine this because this bird is not here. So you can do that, but how far are we going to get to this? There's no need. As long as the idea is there, let the people do the work with their minds. So again, they're saying there are many concepts in each image that are astrologically based, but these concepts are fine. They are within the perception that Ra had for the students. So let's not remove them. But this is not all. This answer is going to get into the most beautiful suggestion and reminder for all seekers. And that's why I'm so excited to talk about this. So let's keep reading. Well, I got too excited with reading and I moved too fast. So Ra continues and says, we wish not to form that which may be considered by any mind-body-spirit complex to be a complete and infallible series of images. There is a substantial point to be made in this regard. We have made, with the questioner's aid, investigating the concept complexes of the great architecture of the archetypical mind. To more clearly grasp the nature, the process, and the purpose of archetypes, Ra provided a series of concept complexes. So now they're saying, okay, so the cards are like this. Let's talk about what we have been doing. First of all, we do not wish to make an infallible or pure series of images. That's not the point, because we cannot do that. And if we did, let's say Ra says, yes, that's the matrix just as we intended it, then any other interpretation, it's going to become too dogmatic, is the thing, you see, because students of the tarot would say, Ra said this, and so you cannot add this or put that. That is not the way it is. It's a game. You play the game to derive the experience of it. You play the game of the tarot to derive the meaning of it. That's it. It doesn't matter what the components are, as long as they are pointing, of course, in the direction of what it's meant to be. You cannot have a game where rules contradict each other. That wouldn't be fun. It would be chaotic and not a game for sure. So they say that there is a substantial point to be made in this regard, in the sense that there is no infallible series of images. They cannot. I mean, it's like saying, describe love in words. You cannot. You can approach, you can incite the feeling on people, remind them of what it feels, but you cannot describe it. So they now say, we have been investigating with you the concept complexes of the great architecture of the archetypical mind. To more clearly grasp the nature of this archetypical mind, the process and the purpose of the archetypes, Ra provided a series of concept complexes. So we are talking about the mind, okay? And to study the mind, we have provided this imagery, which can be helpful. It is not the way of studying the mind. Let's throw away many words and concepts. We're studying the mind. That's what we're doing, okay? The deep mind, not just the conscious, superficial mind. We're studying the deep mind. And if you want to study the deep mind, you have to agree on certain things. Period. Those things are axioms of reality. That's why it's an archetypical. See, the prefix arch means principle, primary, preceding, or base, that which precedes. And so it's the primal parts of the mind. So the archetypical mind is that we're discussing the deep mind, resources of the deep mind. We can use images, we can use thoughts, we can use words, we can use games, we can use so many things. That's down to our creativity, and there is no one way to do this. Period. Okay. Now, if you think that's it, oh man, you have not the slightest idea. There's more. There's way more beauty here. Ra says, in no way whatsoever should we, as humble messengers of the one infinite creator, wish to place before the consideration of any mind-body-spirit complex which seeks its evolution the palest tint of the idea that these images are anything but a resource of working in the area of the development of the faith and the will. My God, so much in here. In no way whatsoever do we want to tell anybody, right, who seeks evolution, the palest tint of the idea, not even a hint, that these images are anything else but a resource. I mean, the paragraph is so beautifully versed. In essence, they're saying, for anybody who seeks evolution, we have not the slightest even intention to tell them anything else but that these images are a resource for working in the area of the development of the faith and the will, which is, again, this is adepthood type of work, indigo ray development, faith and will. So in a very intricate way, Ra is saying, we don't want to tell anybody that this is more than just the studying of the faith and the will, or the development of faith and will, the study of the mind for the development of this. You may say, well, but if that's the point, then you should give me, the most helpful tool. And in a way, they're doing it because they're pointing to studying the archetypical mind. Okay? And this is, of course, a great direction. But there is more. There is more to this. If you think this is it, you haven't the slightest idea. Again, I could probably reread this so many times, but this paragraph in and of itself just explains that. It says straight up, we have no intentions of giving you the idea that this is the most important thing. Right? These images are anything but a resource of working, a resource. It's not even the way, it's a resource. I know I've repeated this and sound redundant, but I'll keep saying it. Let's keep reading. Ra says, to put this into perspective, we must gaze then at the stunning mystery of the one infinite creator. The archetypical mind does not resolve any paradox or bring all into unity. Oh God, so beautiful. This is not the property of any resource which is of the third density. Therefore, we may ask the student to look up from inward working and behold the glory, the might, the majesty, the mystery, and the peace of oneness. Let no consideration of bird or beast, darkness or light, shape or shadow keep any which seeks from the central consideration of unity. Ugh, I don't know how I have energy to do this. I don't even know how I have the honor to explain this or to talk about this. It's something I'm still working on, if you will, allowing the honor to talk about this specific paragraph. Not because Ross said it, but because what it's in there, something that is so intimate to me, right here, right in the heart. So, to put this into perspective, how meaningless this, and I know some people may feel like, kind of disquiet inside when I'm going to say this, but the meaningless nature of studying the Tarot, right? To this level of detail and finding, what is the best card and how do we symbolize this and so on. To put this into perspective, says Ra, we must gaze at the stunning mystery of the one infinite creator. Wow. Let's just look at the one infinite creator. Let's forget everything else. How do we look into the one infinite creator? Well, they say we may ask the student to look up from inward working, right? From all this studying the mind and all this work. Let's rephrase this. We may ask the student to look up from activity and go into being. From doing to being. Okay? That's in essence. That's what we would say in non-dual terms. Stop acting. Stop doing things. Just be. Being is doing. Doing is not being. If you can see that, you have resolved all paradoxes. And that is why they say the archetypical mind does not resolve any paradox or bring all into unity. Well, what does? We may ask the student to look up from this inward working, all this activity, this constant, I need to meditate to become this, I need to do my yoga to allow this, and all this, I need to study philosophies and so on. No, just stop everything and behold the glory, the might, the majesty, the mystery, and the peace of oneness. Now, if you need one direction, which is really what I do, that's why I'm so passionate about this paragraph, and of course that's why I speak the way I do, because what I do with any student, anybody who is in this path and has realized that there is not enough doing to bring this peace from inside, you have to look to yourself. If you don't know yourself, like Jesus said, you will live in poverty, and you are that poverty. This is in the Gospel of Thomas, one of my favorite gospel. It's a Gnostic gospel, of course. Yes, Constantine or anybody else who followed the establishing of Christianity as we know it would not have included this book. Beautiful one. I highly recommend reading it. So yes, if you don't know yourself, then that's oneness. You are one. It's not that everything is one. That's a dualistic, sort of a very dualistic way to view things. Like, we are all one. There is no we in one. You are that oneness. And you can see that directly from the essence of meditation. It doesn't take long. I don't know why people are so distracted and totally immersed in so many other activities that think that they're going to bring him to the experience of oneness. It's not. There's only one direction for this. There's only one practice, and it's to continuously remember who you are. But you need to know who you are. That's what I'm devoted, and hopefully I'll keep doing this for the rest of my life. Finally, because I need to end this, they say, let no consideration of bird or beast, darkness or light, shape or shadow, keep any which seeks from the central consideration of unity. Let nothing distract you from that, from the central consideration of unity. Okay, there's more. Believe it or not, this is the last part. Ra says, we are not messengers of the complex. Some people may disagree with that. I may even disagree with that because they are very complex, but they're saying it here explicitly. They say we bring the message of unity. In this perspective of unity, only in this perspective of unity, may we affirm the value to the seeker of adepthood, of the grasping, articulating, and use of this resource of the deep mind, exemplified by the concept complexes of the archetypes. So this right here says, if you read into it, I mean, it just says it plainly, we are messengers of unity. Only from the realization of unity is from where we can speak of the concept complexes that are the archetypes. In other words, we're not here to discuss anything but unity, and from unity is that we can talk about anything else, including, of course, the archetypical mind. So Ra establishes here plainly, we're only interested in discussing from the point of view of unity. In this perspective only, may we affirm the value to the seeker of adepthood, of grasping, articulating, and use of resource of the deep mind. So this is a very needed refresher at this point in the Law of One, the whole material. A needed reminder, a desperately needed reminder for everybody who is in this path and too entangled with all the information and all the practices and all the things. Step away from all of that. And if once you step away from all the mental activity and the agitation of seeking and watching videos and looking for this and listening to the next podcast and all of it, if you cannot sit in silence and in peace, then you're missing something key. You're not missing something, you're missing the key. In fact, I'll use the same word that Ra used back then in session 5, I think, when they said the prerequisite for mental work, in essence, is silence. That's the key, they said. The key is silence. So, in your experience, let me put it this way. If you cannot be at peace with thoughts, if you cannot sit with your thoughts and be at peace, then you're missing something. You're missing the thing, if we can even call it a thing. If there's this impetus to find the next thing, to do the next thing, trust me, I've been there, because before I was able to find, I was always looking for this. I knew that I was looking for this, I just didn't know how to. And I looked at so many things, and I just kept discarding them and saying, nope, this is not it, nope, this is not it, that's not it. I just knew what I wanted, but I didn't know how to. Until I was able to look inside and say correctly, that's it. And then I was able to see it everywhere. It's not complicated. If I did it, anybody can do it. Anybody. And I think this is what Ra is suggesting here, vehemently, I might say. Conclusions. I'm going to, of course, bring this to the conclusions by saying something. Our ego, spiritual ego, can get really pumped up by all this knowledge and archetypical mind with the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, but also astrology and archetypical tarot and all these things. And now I learned how to do this, and it can get so decked out, let's say. Spiritual ego can get decked out by all this knowledge, fantastic knowledge, great knowledge. I'm not saying don't study it. That it forgets its nature. That it forgets what was it that it was seeking. And one of the symptoms of this, if not the biggest symptom, is a certain feeling of dissatisfaction, despite all that has been studied, despite all of that has been experienced. Experience after experience, activity after activity. Well, I like to say that you can throw everything aside, and you'll still be able to do this. Discard everything in your life. In fact, that's a beautiful exercise to do. Just get rid of everything in your mind. Absolutely everything. And when I say get rid of everything, I don't mean try to calm your mind. I mean forget that you need any thought to reach where you want to go. And in fact, you'll be there. My biggest influence out there, believe it or not, is not the law of one. It's Zen. A lot of people don't know this, so I wish to make it known to people. My biggest influence is not the law of one. I speak the law of one because I attract a lot of people who want to know about the nature of reality and metaphysics and so on. But the biggest influence in my life has been Zen. You know how many books we study in Zen? 0. You know how many concepts we learn in Zen? 0. You know how many precepts? 0. We learn absolutely nothing. We unlearn everything. And that is the way. Everything else is just a disturbance in your mind. So, throw everything out. We don't need all of this. What is Zen, you might ask? Well, it's called direct transmission. It's not even, I teach the direct path, which is too much. It is too much nonsense already. And even when we try to teach the pathless path, which is beyond the direct path in terms of directions, there is no directions there. Even that's too much. Anything said is too much. Whereas, in Zen, that's what we do. That's why it's so confusing, because we're approaching it with an idea that I need to learn something and do something. I need to do that, which you're doing. Zazen. That's meditation, right? That's the highest form of meditation. No, it isn't. Shikantasa it is. Shikantasa it is. What is Shikantasa? Can you teach me? No. You can only teach yourself there, if anything. So, why do I say all of this? Because we don't need any of these studies to get where we want to. This is just for the fun of it. And like Ra said, only from this perspective, from unity, is that we may affirm the value of these tools. Are they helpful? Sure they are. Are they needed? No, they aren't. So don't get all confused by them or thinking that you need to master them for some reason. That's all I got for today. Really, really appreciate the fact that you are listening up until this point. That means a lot to me. Not many people are interested in this particular path, and I love it. So I love sharing this, especially this last answer, which is beautiful. So this is the point where I tell you thank you for listening this far, and I have nothing else to say, but we'll continue with Archetypical Mind. Fortunately, unfortunately, for the rest of session 97, we're going to get into the significator. Actually, there's beautiful information there, of course. I'm just coming out of my Zen view. So we're going to continue this, and we'll finish session 97 in the next episode. So take good care of yourself. Have a good day, good night, whatever you are. And I'll see you in part 2 of session 97.